This past Saturday was UFC 310, Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Asakura, and Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Machado Garry. And I'm going to go through my top 3 takeaways for UFC 310. I'm going to give you a couple honorable mentions, then I'm going to go from 3 to 1, one being my biggest takeaway from UFC 310. Let's start off with my first honorable mention. And that is that Machado Garry versus Aljamain Sterling was a great fight. Not only was it a great fight, it deserved to be on the main card. Now, I already knew this on paper going into the card, that it was horribly misplaced. It should have arguably been a #1 contender fight in the featherweight division, but for some reason it was put on the prelims in favor of Bryce Mitchell versus Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie, the butt scooter, who doesn't have a win in years, who literally pulled guard for every single round, and if Bryce Mitchell doesn't get that 3rd round KO, it's literally the worst fight on the card. And we have Aljamain Sterling and Machado Garry, arguably a #1 contender fight in the featherweight division, because right now, outside of Volkanovski getting his rematch with Topuria, there's no other contender. You know, you could say Diego Lopez. Diego Lopez hasn't earned a shot yet. Machado already has a win over him, a dominant win over him. Okay, you can say, oh, he threw up submissions. Oh my God, he threw up submissions. It was short notice. I get it. You know, we can say great on Diego Lopez for stepping in on short notice and being somewhat competitive. But it was a clear win for Machado. I actually like to see that rematch next, by the way. But some fans were still crapping on this fight. It was high-level grappling. I mean, there was crazy scrambles. There was crazy positioning. There was a crucifix, or I think there might have been 2 crucifix positions. One Evloev had when he was on bottom, and then also when he was on top. The fight was exciting. Aljo had 2 big slams. And for some reason, people still calling it boring. I mean, these are just ultra-casual takes. I don't even want to spend too much time on it. And also, I'll add to this honorable mention, O'Malley beating Sterling was a complete and utter fluke. Would not happen. You know, to quote Michael Chandler, 9 times out of 10, Aljamain Sterling would beat Sean O'Malley. I'm confident in that after watching him grapple and being very effective against Machado Garry up a weight class. Had he got a hold of Sean O'Malley, he would have ragdolled him. Unfortunately, Aljo was put in the worst, set of circumstances going into that fight, and O'Malley has elite level striking, so O'Malley caught him and finished him. But yeah, Aljo would beat Sean O'Malley in a rematch. And if I'm Aljo right now, I campaign on going back down to bantamweight and avenging my loss against O'Malley now that O'Malley doesn't have the belt anymore. I don't think the UFC would do it, but that's a rematch I could get behind. I'd actually be hyped for that. So I think Aljo should campaign for a Sean O'Malley rematch at bantamweight. Next honorable mention and last honorable mention, and this is going to be short and sweet because I'm going to make an entire dedicated video on it later tonight. The UFC announced UFC 312, Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. They announced it at UFC 310. This is a complete and utter abomination. The UFC completely fumbled one of the biggest fights they could possibly make right now, which was Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev. And the fans defending it by saying, man, Sean might have lost his title, but it was close. It was close. Of course he deserves a rematch. I mean, you guys are just incredibly biased. There's no doubt, there was no debate who deserves a middleweight title shot more, Sean Strickland or Khamzat Chimaev? It's Khamzat Chimaev. There better be a very good reason for why Khamzat Chimaev's not getting the title fight, but I'm going to do an entire video on that, so I could talk about it for literally 45 minutes. I'll do an entire dedicated video on it later tonight. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. As soon as it's done, I'll link it down in the description. Let's get on to my actual list, starting off with number 3, and this is actually a lengthy third takeaway, okay? And that is, and I have to look at my notes here. I got some notes here. That is that Clay Guida, Chris Weidman, Anthony Smith, and Kron Gracie all need to retire. You know, consider the third takeaway, consider it an honorary cuts video. Because I actually had to go and take notes on their records. Because there's no way I could remember it, and there's no way I could just look at it and calculate it live. Because these guys are all washed up. Some of them were never good, Kron Gracie. So listen. Anthony Smith. Let's start off with Clay Guida. Let's start off in order of the card. Clay Guida is on a 3-fight losing skid. Has lost 4 out of his last 5. The one that he won was a boring split decision against a guy who retired. And he is 3-7 in his last 10 fights. I mean, why is he still on the UFC roster? It's unbelievable. He's 43 years old. He's 43 years old. What is Dana White kicking it with Clay Guida and the boys? Is that what's going on here? I mean, the walkout took forever. He faked his retirement like a fight or 2 ago just so he could get on the mic. It's clear that he just can't let it go. He likes being on TV. Why are we still giving him fights? I mean, Chase Hooper absolutely wrecked him. And you look at his resume. I mean, look at his resume. Boom, got destroyed in the first round by Chase Super. Lost to Joaquim Silva, got dominated by Joaquim Silva. Before that, got dominated by Rafa Garcia. His last win's against Scott Holtzman, I just mentioned. It's a split decision win. Holtzman retired immediately afterwards. Finished in the first round against Claudio Puelles. His last legitimate win was in 2021 against Leonardo Santos. Get rid of Clay Guida and his boys, okay? We don't need him on the roster anymore. Let's move on to Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman's 40 years old. Okay, he lost to Eric Anders, got absolutely smashed, looked horrible in the fight to begin with. But let's go over his numbers. Again, I had to take notes. I had to break out the calculator to start figuring out these guys' records. Chris Weidman is 3-8 in his last 11 and has been finished in 7 out of 8 of those losses. Has been finished in 7 out of 8 of his last 8 losses. I mean, that is insane. So he gets destroyed by Eric Anders. He had one moment in the first round. Outside of that, it looked like he was going to stumble just walking. It looks like he needs a walker. The Bruno Silva fight, the only reason he won is because he poked Bruno Silva in the eye 20 times and then blamed Bruno Silva for it. So you know what? Matter of fact, keep Chris Weidman around. Let's give him a top 10 opponent next. You know what? I forgot. You know, I poked Bruno Silva to a TKO win. It ended up being overturned to a unanimous technical decision. But yeah, let's actually give him a top 10. Before that, got absolutely brutalized by Brad Tavares. Before that was when he broke his leg against Uriah Hall. People are going to act like the broken leg is the reason that he's washed up, which definitely it's a contributing factor. He was a scrub before then. He was an overhyped champion when he was actual champion. The Omari Akhmedov win in 2020, he looked like garbage. Go back and watch that. I can still remember it to this day. The cardio looked atrocious from both of them. Got destroyed by Dominic Reyes before that. Got absolutely brutally KO'd by Jacare Souza before that. Beat Kelvin Gastelum. If I'm not mistaken, he got dropped by Kelvin Gastelum. The only reason he won this fight is because he had a size advantage against Kelvin Gastelum. Before that, got starched by Gegard Mousasi begging for a DQ and ended up getting TKO'd instead once they reviewed it. Before that, destroyed by Yoel Romero. Before that is when Luke Rockhold took his soul. Okay? This dude gets finished nonstop. Then you have Anthony Smith, okay? 2 out of 5 in his last 7. By the way, Chris Weidman's 40 years old. 2 out of 5 in his last 7, been finished in his last 3. Why are we still keeping Anthony Smith around? He's 36 years old, but his overall record, 37-21. This dude has some miles on him. He's been finished. I mean, this is insane. He's been finished 16 times in his career. 16 times. Got starched by Dominic Reyes, curled into a ball the entire second round. I mean, this dude is delusional. I know people are like, Joey, chill. He had a death and a friend and whatnot. Like, I'm sympathetic to that. But that doesn't change the fact. So I'm supposed to feel sympathy for him in his personal life, which I do, so that I'm supposed to lie about his performance in the cage? No, that doesn't make any sense to me. This dude goes out there for a paycheck every single time and curls up into a ball. He's not even competitive. I don't want to watch him fight. I don't want to see him. Oh, yeah, Anthony Smith's going to go out there and curl up into a ball and just get beat up and then complain about the stoppage probably, which he didn't in this case. Fight before that got dominated by a short notice middleweight and Roman Dolidze. Dolidze isn't even an elite middleweight. Got a win over Vitor Petrino because Petrino has no fight IQ. Was literally dominating him on the feet, shoots into a guillotine. Got destroyed, got made to do a spinneroonie against Khalil Roundtree. Split decision win against Ryan Spann, who just gassed out. Destroyed by Johnny Walker, destroyed by Magomed Ankalaev. I mean, his last win streak was back in 2021. Devin Clark, Jimmy Crute, and Ryan Spann. Look, it's time for Anthony Smith to hang it up. I don't want to see him fight anymore. And then you have Kron Gracie, who was on the main card. Kron Gracie's on a 3-fight losing streak. How old is Kron Gracie is the real question. 36 years old. 36 years old, 3-fight losing streak. Lost to Bryce Mitchell, lost to Charles Jourdain, lost to Cub Swanson. In the fashion in which he's losing, a.k.a. butt scooting, dragging his ass on the canvas like a dog with a dingleberry, and then he has no striking, he has no game plan. I mean, this guy's the definition of... Why was he on the main card of 310? I never want to see him fight again. Get him out of the organization. I'm being dead serious. Clay Guida, Chris Weidman, Anthony Smith, Kron Gracie. I should have summarized all their records. That's what I should have done. But I didn't do that. All of them need to get out of the UFC. I don't want to see any of them fight anymore. I do not want to see any of them fight again. That's long enough on the scrubs. Basically, consider that a little mini cuts video for you. All those guys are just nowhere close to be elite. It's an embarrassment for them to even be fighting in the UFC. Chris Weidman can't even walk straight. Anthony Smith curls into a fetal position. Okay? Kron Gracie just drags his ass on the carpet. I could outstrike Kron Gracie. Okay? So, yeah, get rid of all of them. Moving on to my number 2 takeaway. And I think this might upset some of you guys, but I don't know. but that is that Belal Muhammad will beat Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, I already leaned Belal heavily when it was originally announced. I most likely would have picked Belal to beat Shavkat. Everyone was acting like Shavkat's infallible, unbeatable. You know, I understand that he was undefeated, nothing but finishes. But listen, after watching that performance on Saturday, Shavkat is about where I thought he was. And just seeing that performance, and I don't even think it was a bad performance. He beat Ian Machado Garry. He beat him 3-2. Beat him via decision. I think Gary's very good. But what that fight showed me, which I already suspected, is that Belal Muhammad is better than Shavkat Rakhmonov. I mean, if he's struggling in the clinch with Ian Machado Garry, Gary's very good. I think Belal's better in the clinch. And I think the reason Garry didn't outstrike Shavkat more is because Garry was a little bit worried about the takedowns early. Once he started getting his confidence in defending the takedowns is when he started really opening up his striking in the 3rd and 4th round. And then in the 5th round, he takes Shavkat's back. I think Belal will be able to outstrike Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he'll be able to out-grapple Shavkat Rakhmonov offensively. We've never seen anyone offensively grapple Shavkat. That was the narrative going into 310. Well, guess what? Gary took his back and damn near finished him with a rear naked choke in the 5th round. So you're telling me Belal, who went out there and dominated Leon Edwards, went out there and outstruck Leon Edwards for 5 rounds, went out there and dunked Leon Edwards on his bald spot, he's not going to be able to take down Shavkat. He's not going to be able to outstrike Shavkat. I think Belal is a lock to beat Shavkat. Unless they don't fight until 2026, maybe at the same time McGregor finally comes back and gives Chandler his red panty night, I think Belal goes out there and beats Shavkat. I am so confident now. And again, I was already leaning Belal. So this isn't like a massive takeaway. And I'm not even shitting on Shavkat's performance because I thought he had a very effective game plan. I thought it was a chess match against an elite level Ian Machado Garry. But I just think, you know, if you're not having a little bit more success against Garry in the clinch and in the grappling, and as a matter of fact, you're getting out grappled and Gary's having the more substantial moments on the ground, I think that's a bad matchup when you're fighting Belal Muhammad. Belal, remember the name Muhammad. He doesn't get the respect that he deserves. He's the UFC welterweight champion. He has very good grappling, very good wrestling, and very good striking. Every time out, Belal's striking has improved. So I'm picking Belal to beat Shavkat. I'll throw this on there at the end. I'll throw this as like a part 2 of the second takeaway. Ian Machado Garry is a future champion. Now, I already believe this going into this fight. This fight, in particular, this loss, just cemented it for me. Because I think if Garry would have won this fight, I think he probably loses to Belal Muhammad. I would have felt the same way as I was just talking about Shavkat. But now Garry loses to Shavkat, has something to grow and learn off of, suffers his first defeat, comes back more motivated than ever. He's 27 years old. He's damn near 2 years younger than Bo. I think Bo's 28, but he's turning 29 in January, where Gary's not even turning 28 until like the end of 2025. I just looked it up, but I don't even remember. So think about that. Ian Machado Garry's 2 years younger, damn near, than Bo Nickel. Okay, and I know you could say, oh, well, experience and whatnot, but you get my point. There's a point I'm trying to make there. He's one of the younger contenders at welterweight. It's the changing of the guard. I mean, soon Belal's going to be gone. I'm not saying, you know, in the immediate future, but in the next year or two, Belal's probably going to have a fall off when he gets to be 38, 39 years old, okay? Max 3 years, okay? At that point, even if Belal doesn't fall off for 3 years, and let's say he's a dominant champion, that's 3 years. Garry will be 30 years old when Belal's fallen off. Usman's already fallen off. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. Colby is basically already fell off. So basically, you'll have Garry, JDM, Shavkat. Who else? Let me actually look at the division real quick. You'll have Leon Edwards, who will still be there, who's I think like 31 to 32 right now. You'll have Shavkat, Brady, JDM, Garry, and Buckley, basically. Maybe Morales and Prates at the top right then. You know, by the time we have the changing of the guard. I think Garry, man, I really do believe he's going to be one of those guys that's constantly vying for the title, if not a champion. I believe he will be a future champion, especially after I seen his skills on Saturday night. I already knew how good he was, but to see him go out there and use his jiu-jitsu to potentially submit Shavkat, even I didn't expect that. So I think Garry will improve vastly over the next 6 months before probably his next fight when he returns to 2025. And I think by the time he's like 29, 30, I think he'll be fighting for a title, and I do believe he will win a welterweight title at some point in his career. Moving on to my number 1 takeaway, and this is kind of a 3-piece, okay? I kind of combined a lot of these takeaways, but that is that the flyweight division is dead. The heavyweight division is dead, but I mean that in a little bit of a different way. And also the UFC needs to re-sign Muhammad Mokaev. So let's start off with the flyweight division. Actually, you know what? Let's start off with the heavyweight division. The heavyweight division is garbage, okay? Heavyweight division is completely dead in a different capacity than what I'm talking about flyweight. So if you look at heavyweight right now, you have John Jones as the champion. You have Tom Aspinall as the #1 contender or interim champion. Then you have Ciryl Gane and Alexander Volkov. Basically, that's the entire division, okay? Rest of the guys are basically scrubs that literally I can compete with. Okay, maybe Jalton Almeida. Throw Jalton Almeida into the mix. Curtis Blade's never going to be champion. Sergey Pavlovich never going to be champion. Sergey Spivak literally scrub. I mean, after number 6, I mean, basically I could compete with these guys. We're talking Spivak, Tybura, Rosenstruck, Lewis, Tuivasa. I mean, I don't even know if any of these guys train, okay? Once Jones leaves, you have Tom Aspinall at the top. Gane looked like garbage against Volkov. Volkov didn't even look particularly great. And even the Gane and Volkov that I saw on Saturday night, and granted, Gane did break his toes, I think Tom Aspinall beats those guys, and I'm not like I'm kind of interested in Aspinall versus Gane, but then after that, what? So let's say we see Aspinall Gane, Jones retires. What's next? I mean, the whole entire, we got Shamil Gaziev coming up. Okay, of course, he's a future champion, as you guys know. Mick Parkin, Waldo Cortez Acosta's in the rankings. Waldo Cortez. Yeah, the heavyweight division's dead. I mean, it's really dead. I don't think Gane or Volkov look particularly excellent. I'm not sure how good Aspinall will even look, you know, in a second or third round against an elite level guy, but there's an elite level guy really to challenge him at right now. So heavyweight is completely and utterly dead. And flyweight's dead in a different capacity. We have a bunch of elite level fighters at flyweight, but Pantoja has cleaned out the division. He beats Kai Asakura on Saturday night, absolutely dominates him and finishes him in the second round. He has multiple wins over Brandon Royval. He has multiple wins over Brandon Moreno. By the way, I'm going in order of the rankings. Amir Albazi just lost to Brandon Moreno. Okay, he could fight Kai Kara France. Okay, that's probably the next matchup that makes the most sense. Taishiro Taira just lost. He beat Taishiro Taira. Alex Perez, I think he might even... Didn't he fight Alex Perez at one point in time or no? Okay, but either way, he would beat Alex Perez regardless. I mean, who's there for him to fight? Asul Almabayev going to make his way up the ranks? He's already beat Steve Erceg. I think he's already beat Manel Kopp, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he has beat Manel Kopp as well. Who's he going to fight? Who's he going to fight? I mean, that's the entire top 10, essentially. So, you got Kai Kara France as an option. You could do a Royval or Moreno rematch. I think he's fought Royval twice, Moreno 3 times. Correct me if I'm wrong. One of the Moreno fights was on the Ultimate Fighter, so you might not see it on his record. Like, Pantoja has kind of cleaned out the division. But guess what? The UFC should have had Muhammad Mokaev. Muhammad Mokaev, 12-0, 7-0 in the UFC with 5 finishes. The fan base cheered the UFC as a, yeah, man, he did stuff that the UFC didn't like. He's a bad guy. Don't re-sign him. He sucker punched someone who allegedly sucker punched him as well, or cheap shot at him as well. And then he admitted to it because he had to get his back. And people are like, oh no, how could he do that? Get rid of him. It's just an anti-Dagestani bias. Mokaev is the rightful #1 contender. He was the rightful #1 contender before Steve Erceg got his title shot, which Steve Erceg had like 2 wins in the UFC at that point, maybe 3. You have Kai Asakura getting a title shot in his debut. That's how desperate the UFC are for fresh contenders. And meanwhile, you have Muhammad Mokaev, super young, undefeated, 12-0, 7-0 in the UFC, 5 finishes, with a really good grappling base and jiu-jitsu base to potentially beat Pantoja. Now, I wouldn't favor Mokaev to beat Pantoja, but damn if that wouldn't be an interesting matchup. So the UFC needs to sign Mokaev. I might even make a dedicated video on this. They need to re-sign Mokaev. I think he has a fight coming up in Brave FC. I'm sure he'll win that matchup. And then the UFC needs to bring him back. They can be like, yeah, we taught him his lesson. He went out and got a win. I think they definitely plan on bringing him back at some point. Basically, they just wanted to exude their power over him. Yeah, we control your career. We could end your career in an instant. Go out and win some fights and we'll bring you back. Don't get lippy with us. That's what the UFC likes to do. Dana White and UFC likes to rule with an iron fist. And essentially, that's what they tried to do with Mokaev. And Mokaev can win a fight. They can bring him back. They can have him fight Pantoja instead of signing debutantes. What are we just going to... We're just going to watch him fight Royval. Or, and I don't love this idea, but I do kind of like it. I guess you can have Figgy go back down to flyweight. Figgy's coming off a loss against Petr Yan. I think he has a win over Pantoja, if I'm not mistaken. How long ago was that, right? That was back in 2019. Figgy has a win over Pantoja. I wouldn't mind seeing that ran back. You know, maybe Figgy can get a win at flyweight real quick and then get a title shot. I wouldn't mind seeing that ran back. That's another option for flyweight. But outside of that, flyweight's dead. Now, the reason I was saying flyweight being dead is different from heavyweight being dead is because flyweight is full of great talent. But the champion's already beaten a lot of these guys, and they're running out of contenders. Basically Pantoja's a wood chipper, just chipping through contenders. So unless Pantoja's going to go up, which, to be honest, Pantoja-Merab actually sounds like a banger matchup now that I think about it. And I know Umar's about to potentially win the belt, and they're fighting January. But either way, you could see Pantoja fight the winner of Umar-Merab. That'd be another option. I wouldn't mind that necessarily. But yeah, Pantoja deserves more respect. Let's throw that in there as well. Pantoja deserves more respect. Flyweight is low-key dead because of a dominant champion. And yeah, for some reason, people were calling Pantoja boring. Pantoja is literally super exciting. The fight against Asakura was amazingly exciting. The fight against Urseg was exciting. The fight against Royval, the last fight against Royval wasn't great. Fight against Moreno was literally like fight of the year back at UFC 290. And people were calling Pantoja boring. So, makes no respect. Give him more respect. The UFC fans, he deserves more respect from the UFC fans. But yeah, hopefully they re-sign Muhammad Mokaev. Let me know if you want a dedicated video on that. I might make that. I'll be making the video on Dricus du Plessis, Sean Strickland at some point later tonight. So make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Were there any takeaways that you had that weren't on my list? Let me know down in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.